what it was like to be held in a Soviet gulag.
Lurking within the shadows of Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union was a system of forced labor camps known as the Gulag.
Dude, I never understand, like, obviously so many people in history have had an obscene amount of power, like current presidents, current dictators, whatever it is, right? But how did Joseph Stalin not feel any fucking remorse or sadness from, like, actually just killing, like, 12 million of his own people? Obviously, he might not see it, like, in fucking person, but, like, still to just, like, go to sleep at night, like, just being like, yeah, I just murdered 12 million people. Like, I am the reason that millions of people are suffering or dead. Just, like, not caring.
Gulags were nightmarish prisons containing anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 prisoners.
Didn't gulags also, like, recently end? Not recently, like, oh, like 2000s. I'm saying, like, recently end in the scale of, like, it's not like World War II era. After Stalin's death in 1953, the number of prisoners in gulags considerably declined until it was officially closed in 1960. But it says that people remained in Gulag, famous Camp Perm 36, until 1987. So there were people in gulags that literally just might be alive now.
Prisoners apiece. If you were unlucky enough to find yourself as one of those prisoners, you would be subject.
Oh, it's fucking horrible, dude. You live in Russia in the Russian winter. You're basically a slave. And you live in negative 20 fucking degree Fahrenheit conditions.
To backbreaking labor, brutality, extreme weather, starvation, and disease. Today on Weird History, we're exploring what life was like for a prisoner in the Soviet Gulag. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe you'd like to hear about next. Okay, time to take a disturbing trip back to the USSR. And we don't mean we're taking a drive in a Moskvich. The Gulag was notorious for imprisoning people based on false or even non-existent charges, including treason, spying.
Bro, dead ass. So they just throw you in there for no reason? Like, you didn't even do anything wrong. They're just fucking chucking you in there?
And anti-revolutionary activity. Sympathy toward anyone perceived to be enemy of the state could also...
Yeah, probably that. Like, if you were somebody that just was anti-communist or anti-USSR... like, notably, somebody would just rat on you, and then you were just fucking thrown into a camp.
Also be punished with a trip to the camps. That means if Rocky had lost Ivan Drago, not only would he have been shipped off to the Gulag, but so would Paulie. And probably the robot as well. The Soviet Union relied on these flimsy pretexts to incarcerate anyone they pleased. But the real reason was the economic value of prisoners as slave labor. Stalin's aggressive 5-year plan, an effort to quickly bring industrialization to the Soviet Union, required a huge amount of labor for its massive construction projects. The only problem...
Bro, and all that for fucking what? Like, whenever I hear about dictators doing some crazy shit, like, bro's dead. Stalin's dead. Hitler's dead, right? Chairman Mao's dead, right? Like, a lot of people that existed that did things that were, you know, horrific. Why, right? Like, they always have this end goal of, like, not necessarily world domination, but ensuing, like, putting their ideologies out there. But, like, you're not even going to be able to see or experience anything that you're doing. Like, they're causing pain to try and achieve something that they deem as good, but it's like, for what? Like, you're just going to fucking die in 40 years anyway. Just be nice to the people around you, you know? Like, why fucking throw people in gulags and ruin their lives?
A lack of knowledgeable and skilled specialists who could do the work. So Stalin's plan created enormous labor camps to get the job done.
They're just evil. I always wonder how that starts, though. Like, there's people that make bad fucking decisions, right? There's people that fuck up. Everybody fucks up, right? Everybody in this chat's fucked up, right? But it's like, this is another level of, like, there's, like, robbers and murderers and people that do all this shit. And then there's, like, Joseph Stalin, who's, like, so beyond human morality where it's, like, you can't even compare him to anyone. Not even just power tripping, chat. It's, like, there's, like, people that are in jail right now for killing, like, 2 people. And they're not good people. But Joseph Stalin is, like, not even on the same scale as them.
He was sketchy facial hair with an ambitious business model that relies on unpaid labor. Sounds like a tech startup CEO to me. Millions of people were arrested, deported to the Gulag, and forced...
Stalin's parents hit him? Bro, there's probably people in chat that have their parents hit him here. hit them here. They're not going to become dictators that murder 12 million people.
Become the builders of Stalin's dream. Camp survivors shared chilling stories of being picked up by secret police and shipped off to the Gulag without a trial. Unsuspecting citizens could be
wow, so just picked up in the middle of the night and just brought to a fucking camp.
snatched up while at work, in the middle of having a meal at a restaurant, walking down the street, or even asleep in their beds. And Stalin had another steady source of workers that was even more disturbing. The Russian Civil War claimed the lives of over 8 million civilians and 800,000 soldiers, leaving millions of children homeless throughout the 1920s and 30s. Desperate to live, some of these children turned to crime to survive, and were often rounded up and sent to the Gulag to bolster Stalin's workforce. You are never too young to swing a hammer for the motherland. Following a terrible interrogation, prisoners would be loaded onto a cattle car with others, sometimes waiting days for the train to depart for the Gulag. Conditions on the train were subhuman. Prisoners were given nothing.
Holy shit, dude. Just standing. Like, no room to even sit. They're just gonna be fucking standing there for however long it takes to get to that fucking Gulag on a train track.
Were subhuman. Prisoners were given nothing but salted fish to eat, and the only toilet was a hole in the floor. Many succumbed to dehydration and extreme heat or cold before they even arrived at the Gulag. World War II proved to be another boon for the Gulag, and not in the way you might expect. After the Germans invaded
I always perceive Gulag starting around World War II, though. This was, like, way before then.
the Western Soviet Union in the summer of 1941, the Red Army beat a hasty, chaotic retreat as Hitler's forces swarmed over the land. Eventually,
And we had to be allied. The U.S. had to be allies with Russia during World War II. Like, while all of this was still going down. Like, the leader, like, the president, like, FDR and fucking... Who was after FDR that dropped the bombs? Short white guy with glasses. Oh, my God, I always forget his fucking name. Truman. Harry Truman and fucking FDR. Dude, both of them had to, like, meet with Stalin. Like, knowing that he's, like, kind of, you know, torturing a lot of his country. And just be like, yeah, no, we're good, bro. Like... We're going to be on the same side. But, I mean, that's why the Cold War just immediately started. Like, motherfuckers knew.
The Soviets regained
Shit was
control,
gonna hit the fan
prompting
after.
Stalin to issue Order Number 270 in 1941.
FDR was before World War II. FDR was president during World War II. He was president until 1945, which is, like, the end of the war. Truman was the one that dropped the bombs. But FDR was president from 1939 to 1945.
Which stated that any Red Army soldier who was captured or retreated would face a terrible punishment. Not only would they have to deal with the consequences of their actions, which in some cases would mean being shipped off to a German POW camp, but in addition, their families would be denied food and potentially be sent straight to the Gulag. Basically,
They were sent to prisoner of war camps with the Germans.
your options were either win or be slain on the battlefield. Otherwise, your family would be breaking rocks in a labor camp. As if
Yeah, I mean, that's why everybody was always afraid of the Russian army. I'm not somebody that's like a massive history buff, but I do like learning about history, and it's crazy that, like, the fear of fighting a Russian soldier had to have been so high. Because everybody else, not everybody else, but a lot of people that were fighting were there because, you know, they believed that they needed to fight, or they were just drafted, and it was like, you know, if they really wanted to try and get out of it, they probably could. They would receive heavy repercussions, but not something that the Russians are doing. Like, you're going into battle knowing that that guy that's fighting you on the Russian side is literally has, this is the best scenario he's in. This is the best place he could be in right now. He's fighting you, and worst case, he dies, right? Best case, he kills you, keeps fighting. And, like, obviously, yeah, that's everybody in war, but, like, he has to be there. He wants to live because if he doesn't fight, his entire family fucking dies. And they'll kill his whole family.
If that wasn't bad enough, Gulag prisoners were assigned to special penal battalions and sent to the front lines of the war. Some would cross minefields, clearing them for other soldiers to cross. Others were effectively used as human shields to protect the good soldiers. Anyone who tried to make a run for it would be gunned down by special blocking units with strict orders to fire upon deserting prisoners. Still, getting blown up by a mine or shot by Germans and or your fellow countrymen might have been a better deal than actually having to live in the Gulag. Following the hellish train
Run by gangs.
to the Gulag, inmates had to contend with the harsh reality of daily life in the prison, where countless lives were claimed by disease, accidents, violence, and exposure.
Bro, it's wild. Like, where are y'all from, country-wise? Like, I'm going to say we, but I mean this for specifically the people that live in the U.S. Like, it's crazy we were born in the U.S. Like, obviously, with your parents and everybody, they all live here. But, like, whatever. If you were born... Well, it's crazy you were born anywhere. Like, there are people that are just born in, like, North Korea. There's people that are just born in, like just spawn, right? Like, my spawn is the United States. And it feels normal. But people that spawn in Russia, it feels normal. Or the UK, or Sweden, or wherever you guys are saying you're from. Ireland, Finland, Switzerland. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's just like, fuck, man. Like, you're just like, you just live in South Africa, or you just live in fucking Italy, and you're like, yeah, this is I don't know. It's like, it's kind of a different version of Sonder, I guess, but not really, in the sense that it's like, your life seems so normal to you, and everything else seems so abnormal, but, like, the same is said from everybody else. Like, for the people that are watching me that have always lived in South Africa or Ireland or wherever, like, that's so normal to you. But that's so weird to me, right? And vice versa. Like, if you were living in in fucking New Jersey, you'd be like, what the hell?
Food was always in short supply, and most camps provided almost no clothing or shelter. The barracks were often nothing more than ramshackle wooden shacks, offering scant protection from the elements. When you consider the fact that some camps were located north of the Arctic Circle, having nothing but a rickety lean-to shield you from the cold spelled certain doom for a number of prisoners. The only clothing prisoners might receive were padded jackets, with the occasional hat or set of mittens. And what little food they were given lacked nutrition.
Dude, just freezing to death. Literally just freezing to death in fucking Russian winter.
Guards basically controlled every part of a person's life in the Gulag, and their mood could determine how much food, clothing, or water a prisoner would get each day. And the camp's administrators often dangled food in front of desperate prisoners to incentivize them to work harder. It was like being sentenced to an endless team-building exercise, where you're encouraged to die, so your boss has less paperwork. The severe lack of resources led to hoarding. Tobacco, food, shoes, and even sewing needles essentially became a form of currency. Gambling and bartering and fights occurred over these basic items, with prisoners sometimes killing for them. Even though Stalin's regime...
Dude, killing for fucking sewing needles. Holy shit, man.
...regime regularly invented charges to send innocent people to supply their workforces at the Gulag, the camps were also home to actual criminals, including bandits, thieves, and murderers. These real criminals were the elite.
Which is wild, because they might just send you there because you disagree with Stalin, and your fucking cellmates that you're with are, like, actually Russian gang members that, like, murder people.
Of the camp, often sporting specific tattoos related to Russian orthodoxy and culture, and terrorizing other inmates. The gangs controlled virtually every aspect of social life, including who slept where and how food was rationed, and challenging their authority could mean beatings, stabbings, additional hard labor, or worse. Consequently, many prisoners feared the gangs more than the actual guard.
I mean, isn't it similar in, I mean, I don't know about joining gangs in the Russian Gulag, but isn't it really common for people to join gangs in prison as a means of protection? And so it kind of fucks you over when you leave, because then you're kind of like, you know, designated towards them. Just because if you're not a part of a group in like, I'm not just saying like base prison, but like I'm talking like heavy prisons where like there's a lot of like high-profile criminals. Now, I'm not talking, like a high-security one. I'm not talking about, like, a fucking white-collar prison or, like, petty crimes.
Stalin's bold
I'm talking, like, prisons where there's, like, just genuinely rapists and murderers.
Vision of jail, but worse than outside, was no walk in the park for anyone. But women had things especially rough. Many of the female inmates were initially arrested as daughters of enemies of state, meaning they weren't even guilty of any direct offense, real or invented. When they were arrested, mothers were separated from their children, and in the camps, they were expected to perform the same hard labor as men. And even though male and female prisoners were separated, women in the Gulag still faced the threat of being assaulted by guards and male prisoners. Some women were forced to take on Gulag husbands, exchanging sexual favors for protection and better treatment.
Oh my god, dude.
And there weren't exactly safe birth control methods either. When a woman gave birth in the Gulag, the baby stayed with the mother until the age of 2. The combination of poor nutrition, lousy sanitary conditions, and lack of basic necessities tragically cut short many of these infant lives, and some of those who survived developed serious mental and physical ailments. But But despite
Fuck.
all these abominable conditions, some people managed to find romance in the Gulag, and many accounts of these personal experiences still survive today. In one account, published in Orlando Fages, Just Send Me Word, a true story of love and survival in the Gulag, the story of inmate Svieta and her lost love, Lev, unfold through their letters to each other. When the author interviewed them, he found their love got her through her incarceration. Fages writes, Svieta had much less to say, but she sat with Lev and held his hand. And when I asked her what had made her fall in love with
Bro, you know how badass the people are that fucking survived Soviet gulags? Like, fuck, man.
him, she replied, I knew he was my future. When he was not there, I would look for him, and he would always appear by my side. That is love. Exposure to the elements and harsh conditions weren't the only terrible things the Gulag had in store for its prisoners.
Dad lore? Bro, ain't nobody have dad lore like that. Like, your dad just sits down one day. Yeah, I actually survived the Soviet gulag. We lived in freezing conditions, and I only got to eat shitty oatmeal for 6 years. I had to join a gang so I wouldn't die.
Out of the 18 million unfortunate souls incarcerated in the Gulag, many came from diverse professional backgrounds. Doctors, writers, educators, farmers, students, and other people from all walks of life were constantly arrested and shipped off to do
Not a raccoon for the 300 biddies.
hard physical labor, for which they had neither the skill nor the conditioning to safely perform. There's a reason you don't generally hire art students to build a railroad or fix a power line. But Stalin wasn't particularly interested in anyone's well-being. And like most dictators, he'd had the foresight to make it illegal for him to be held accountable for any of his actions. Some
Wow.
inmates cut down trees, while others mined for minerals or did other menial tasks, depending on the camp's location. And since this was years before OSHA was invented, and also Stalinist Russia, safety precautions and personal protective gear weren't given a second thought. Prisoners often worked with no more protection than the clothing they had on their backs, and used primitive hand tools instead of quality equipment, all while working grueling hours in extreme
How many people were in total in the gulags? 20 million, and 2 million died. So there was a 1 in 10 that you die in the gulag. And throughout all the small labor camps, they held anywhere between 2,000 and 10,000 people. 20 million fucking people, dude.
conditions. As a result, thousands of lives were claimed by accidents, freezing, and sheer exhaustion. It wasn't uncommon for a prisoner to be literally worked to death. But with a constant supply of new laborers in the form of criminals, orphans, and dissidents being fed into the camps, Stalin and his inner circle hardly noticed. They had bigger fish to fry. One of those bigger fish? The creation of shipping channels and a Russian navy. To make this a reality, 2 new canals needed to be constructed. The canals would run north and south, requiring extensive labor in a short period of time. An impossible amount of work with an equally impossible time frame. Sounds like a job for the unfortunate prisoners of the Gulag. In 1931, thousands of inmates were transported to the construction zones. There, prisoners dug a 30-mile addition to the White Sea-Baltic Canal. The project took almost 2 years and was mostly dug by hand. An estimated
Dug by hand. Get the fuck out of here, dude. What?
12,000 prisoners lost their lives building the canal, although the actual toll is probably higher. Between 1933 and 1937, the same project unfolded in much the same way along the Moscow-Volga Canal. This time, however, it took twice as long and covered 80 miles. The thousands who perished digging the Moscow-Volga addition were buried in the soil before the canal was flooded over. Today, tourists traveling down the Moscow-Volga Canal are actually sailing over.
That's it? Dude, they're sailing over thousands of dead bodies. Oh my God. Like, if you're ever here, you're, like, actually their corpses are under you.
A mass underwater grave. But it was a small price to pay for Stalin to get his Amazon deliveries on time. As you may imagine, escaping the Gulag was a difficult feat. Even if you managed to get past the guards and the dangerous Gulag gangs,
then you're in the middle of
you
the
still
woods.
had to contend with the harsh Russian wilderness and find your way to a country that wouldn't immediately turn you right back over to Stalin. The only 2 options were Finland and China. For those who actually succeeded in making a great escape, those countries became a safe haven. One notable escape involved a Polish army official named Sławomir Rawicz, who crossed the Himalayas to India on foot. Rawicz dictated the details of his adventure in a
He
1956
fucking fled to India on foot. No. No. Oh my God. Wait, because the USSR, hold up. USSR map. Because Russia, I was like, oh, there's other countries between that. But they used to just be Russia. Like Kazakhstan, Mongolia, like this is what it used to fucking look like. Yeah, these all used to be Russia. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Mongolia. Or where is Mongolia? Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Azerbaijan. I never know how to say it. Armenia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. Dude, that's wild. Russia had, like, actually a third of the fucking world's land. So he had to fucking flee to India to get the fuck out.
Book titled The Long Walk. Despite being somewhat disputed, the story inspired the 2010 film The Way Back, starring Jim Sturgis, a fact which is either a tribute or an indictment of Ravich, depending on how you feel about Across the Universe. A verified escape did happen in 1933, involving a man named Vladimir Chernyavin. When he was transferred to Karelia, near the Finnish border, Chernyavin befriended a local peasant who supplied valuable information about the habits of the camp's guards. Chernyavin used this information to find an escape opportunity. Because of his good behavior, guards allowed his wife and son to visit him in the prison. He and his wife established a code to discuss their escape plan. And in the summer of 1933, the family put their plan into motion. During a scheduled
He dug through the wall.
visit, Chernyavin and his family managed to give the Gulag guard the slip. Per Chernyvin's account, the family crossed rivers, forests, and mountains on their journey. By traveling on foot and camping in the wilderness with few provisions, they managed to elude detection and make it to a hidden boat, which they used to sail to Finland. After establishing their safety in Finland, Chernyavin and his family emigrated to England to live out the rest of their lives. Man, that's a family story that beats the time we got banned from the theme park. At the time
Some survivors are too afraid to discuss their imprisonment.
of Stalin's death in 1953, the Gulag held over 3 million prisoners. On
Oh my god, they wouldn't talk about it after they got released.
paper, it had been a comparatively normal work camp administration. But with Stalin gone, the horrors of the camps became publicly known. Not only was it a cruel and
The average citizen in Russia didn't know what they were doing.
inhumane system, but despite Stalin's insistence that it was necessary to complete his 5-year plan, the Gulag was economically useless. Turns out, you just couldn't trust Uncle Joe. Russia's new premier, Nikita Khrushchev, began a process of de-Stalinization, known as the Thaw, which included the immediate release of millions of Gulag inmates. But even after surviving the Gulag, many were so traumatized by their imprisonment that they remained fearful of discussing it for the rest of their days. The grim legacy of the Gulag is well known to history, but for those who lived through it and their descendants, the wounds may never fully heal. So what do you think? Would you have...
Wow, dude. That is actually nuts. I love that video, though. I love that video, though. I know a lot of people left the stream. I don't give a fuck. That video was amazing. I gotta take a piss, then we're gonna hop into the next one. Coming down, 30 seconds.